Some people believe in fate, others believe in coincidence. I used to think I believed in neither, until the day I met Rebecca Chen, in the most mundane place possible, the DMV. I was 24, fresh out of a mediocre relationship with a guy named Trevor who collected vintage video games and never remembered my birthday. Rebecca was sitting 3 seats away from me, furiously typing on her laptop, her long black hair falling like a curtain around her face. Every few minutes, she'd sigh dramatically and mutter something under her breath. After her 5th exasperated sigh, I couldn't help myself. Bad day. She looked up, and I saw her eyes for the first time, dark and intelligent, with laugh lines at the corners that suggested she smiled often, even though she wasn't smiling now. Thesis edits, she said, gesturing at her laptop. My advisor wants revisions on my revisions. I'm starting to think this PhD will actually kill me. What's your field? Marine biology. I study coral reef restoration. You high school English teacher. I help teenagers understand why Shakespeare matters while they text under their desks. She laughed a real laugh that made her whole face light up. That sounds equally challenging. We talked for the next hour and a half as the DMV line crawled forward at a glacial pace. I learned that Rebecca was 26, originally from San Francisco, obsessed with terrible horror movies, and had a rescue dog named Captain, who was afraid of his own shadow. She learned that I was Sam short for Samantha, that I'd lived in Seattle my entire life, and that I made the world's best chocolate chip cookies. According to my students, when we finally reached the counter and completed our respective tasks, we found ourselves walking out together, conversations still flowing naturally. This is going to sound forward, Rebecca said as we stood in the parking lot, but do you want to grab coffee? I'm not ready to go back to thesis revisions, and you're the most interesting person I've talked to in weeks. I should have said no. I had papers to grade. But something about her made me want to say yes. I know a place, I said. That coffee turned into 4 hours at a cafe, which turned into exchanging numbers, which turned into daily text conversations. Within a month, Rebecca and I were inseparable in the way that new friends sometimes are. Discovering all the things you have in common and finding the differences fascinating rather than off-putting. We had standing plans every Friday night. Sometimes we'd go out dive bars, indie movie theaters, the aquarium where Rebecca would give me private tours and explain the intricate ecosystems with such passion that even fish tanks became fascinating. Other times we'd stay in, ordering takeout and binge-watching horror movies while Captain cowered between us on the couch during the scary parts. Rebecca was the first person I wanted to tell when something happened. When my AP literature class finally understood the symbolism in The Great Gatsby, I texted her immediately. When her research paper got accepted to a prestigious journal, I showed up at her apartment with champagne and a banner I'd made that said Dr. Chen almost. My other friends noticed the change. My roommate Jess commented that I talked about Rebecca constantly. My work friend Marcus asked if we were dating, and I laughed it off. She's just a really good friend, I said, and believed it. Rebecca had been openly bisexual since college, something she mentioned casually one night while we were watching a particularly bad B-horror movie. My ex-girlfriend used to hate these movies, she said during a commercial break. She thought they were stupid. Ex-girlfriend, I repeated, not sure why my heart rate had picked up. Yeah, we dated for 2 years in grad school. She wanted me to give up the PhD and move to New York with her. I wasn't willing to give up my research. She shrugged. Some people aren't meant to last forever. I thought about Trevor, how easy it had been to walk away from that relationship. I just got out of something too. Nothing dramatic. Just wrong person, I guess. Have you had a lot of wrong people? Rebecca asked, studying me with that intense focus she usually reserved for her research. Pretty much all of them, I admitted. I keep thinking each one will be different, but then, a few months in, I realize I'm just going through the motions, like I'm playing a part that doesn't quite fit. Something flickered across Rebecca's face, an expression I couldn't quite read. Maybe you're looking in the wrong places. Maybe, I said, and we went back to the movie. But I thought about that conversation for days afterward. It started small, noticing how Rebecca tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the way her hand would rest on the small of my back when we walked through crowded spaces, how she remembered tiny details about my life, the name of my favorite student, which coffee order I preferred depending on my mood, that I always got anxious before parent-teacher conferences. I started spending extra time getting ready before seeing her, choosing outfits more carefully. wearing the perfume she'd once complimented. I told myself I was just making an effort for my friend. The thoughts came next, intrusive at first, then more frequent, wondering what it would be like to hold her hand, imagining what it would feel like to kiss her, lying awake at night replaying conversations and reading too much into every smile, every touch, every moment. I tried to push it down. I wasn't gay. I'd never been interested in women before. This was just, I didn't know what it was, but it couldn't be what it felt like. One Saturday, Rebecca and I went hiking at Rattlesnake Ledge. It was early October. The trees starting to turn golden, the air crisp and clear. We talked about everything and nothing as we climbed her latest research setback. My student who was struggling at home but writing brilliant essays about Hamlet. Whether Captain would ever overcome his fear of the vacuum cleaner. At the summit, we sat on a rock outcropping overlooking the lake. Rebecca was animated, talking about a new restoration technique she was developing, and I found myself not listening to the words but watching her the way the sunlight caught in her hair, the gestures of her hands as she talked, the pure joy on her face when she discussed her work. "Sam, you're not even listening to me," she said, but she was smiling. "Sorry," I said. "I was just, you're really beautiful when you talk about your research." The words were out before I could stop them. We both froze. "I mean, like, it's beautiful that you're so passionate," I stammered. "Not that you're not beautiful, you are, but I meant." Rebecca was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something vulnerable and hopeful and terrified all at once. "Sam," she said quietly, "what are we doing?" "What do you mean?" "I mean," she took a deep breath, "I mean that I have feelings for you. Real feelings. And I've been trying to ignore them because you're straight, and I don't want to lose you as a friend. But the way you just looked at me, the way you've been looking at me for weeks now, am I imagining it?" My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to deflect, to laugh it off, to protect the friendship, but something else, something deeper made me tell the truth. "I don't think I am," I whispered. "Straight, I mean. Or maybe I am, but you're the exception. I don't know. All I know is that I think about you constantly. You're the best part of my day, every day. And lately I've been thinking about you in ways that friends don't think about each other." Rebecca's eyes were shining with tears. "How long?" "I don't know. Maybe from the beginning, but I didn't recognize it. Definitely for the last few months." "I've been in love with you since July," Rebecca said. "That night we stayed up until 4 a.m. talking about your childhood and why you became a teacher. You fell asleep on my couch, and I just watched you sleep for a while, and I knew I was completely in love with my best friend, who I thought was straight. I'm scared," I admitted. "I don't know how to do this. I've never done this." "Neither have I," Rebecca said. "Not like this. Not with someone who matters this much." We sat there for a long moment, the weight of everything between us. "Can I kiss you?" Rebecca asked finally. "Because I've wanted to for months, and if I don't do it now, I think I might lose my nerve." I nodded, not trusting my voice. She leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. When her lips met mine, it was soft and tentative and absolutely nothing like any kiss I'd experienced before. It felt like understanding something for the first time, like a question being answered, like coming home. When we pulled apart, I was crying. "Was it that bad?" Rebecca asked, trying to joke but looking genuinely worried. "It was perfect," I said. "That's why I'm crying, because nothing has ever felt that right before, and I'm terrified about what that means." She took my hand, threading our fingers together. "We'll figure it out. Together. Okay, okay." The hike down the mountain was surreal. We held hands the entire way, stopping periodically to kiss like teenagers, laughing at ourselves for being so giddy. I kept expecting to feel panic or doubt, but all I felt was certain. In the parking lot, leaning against Rebecca's car, we had to figure out what came next. "So, are we dating now?" I asked. "Do you want to be?" "I think so. Yes, definitely yes. But I need to take this slowly. I need time to understand what this means for me." "I'm not going anywhere," Rebecca promised. "We can go as slow as you need." We decided not to tell people right away. Rebecca understood that I needed time to process my sexuality without the pressure of other people's questions and opinions. We kept our Friday nights, but now they included kissing and cuddling and whispered conversations about feelings that had been building for months. Being with Rebecca felt completely natural and completely foreign all at once. The physical intimacy was new, learning how to touch her, how to be touched, navigating a kind of desire I'd never experienced before. But the emotional intimacy was just an extension of the friendship we'd already built. Is it always this intense? I asked one night as we lay tangled together on her couch, captains snoring at our feet. No, Rebecca said honestly. I've dated enough people to know this is rare. Most relationships don't have this foundation. We built something real before we added romance to it. Does that make it more complicated or less? Both, she admitted. We have more to lose, but we also have more to build on. I spent a lot of time those first few weeks researching and reading coming out stories, articles about sexual fluidity, forums where women discussed realizing they were gay later in life. Some stories resonated, others didn't. I was trying to find a label that fit, trying to understand myself. Was I a lesbian, bisexual, pansexual? Just Rebecca. The uncertainty was frustrating. You don't have to figure it all out right now, Rebecca said when I expressed my frustration. Sexuality can be fluid. Some people know their whole lives. Some people discover it later. Some people's attractions change over time. There's no wrong way to be queer. But I want to understand, I insisted. How did I not know? How did I spend 24 years thinking I was straight? Because heteronormativity is powerful, she said. Because when you're told your whole life that you're supposed to like men, you don't question whether you actually do. You just assume the lack of spark is normal, that everyone feels that way. I thought about all my relationships with men, the awkwardness, the feeling of performing rather than being, how I'd always attributed relationship failures to incompatibility, rather than questioning whether I was attracted to men at all. Looking back, I said slowly, there were signs, girls I admired too intensely, feeling jealous when my friends got boyfriends in ways that didn't make sense, that crush on my camp counselor when I was 15 that I convinced myself was just wanting to be like her. The brain is good at explaining away things that don't fit our understanding of ourselves, Rebecca said. Eventually, after weeks of reflection, I settled on identifying as a lesbian. The relationships I'd had with men had never felt authentic, because they weren't. I'd been trying to force myself into heterosexuality, and it had never quite worked. The realization was both liberating and overwhelming. Jess, my roommate, was the first person I told. We were in our shared kitchen, and she was making her signature terrible smoothies that she insisted were super healthy. I need to tell you something, I said. She looked up, immediately concerned. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Actually, things are really good. Rebecca and we're together, dating, and I'm gay. Or a lesbian. I'm still getting used to the words. Jess stared at me for a long moment, then burst out laughing. Oh, thank God, I've been waiting for you two to figure it out for months. Wait, Sam, you talk about her constantly. You get this look on your face when you mention her name, and the way you look at her. I was starting to think I was going to have to spell it out for you. Was I really that obvious? To everyone except yourself, apparently. She pulled me into a hug. I'm happy for you. Rebecca's great, and you seem lighter somehow, like you've finally let yourself breathe. She was right. I did feel lighter. Telling Marcus was easier. He was my gay work bestie, and when I nervously explained the situation over coffee, he just grinned. Welcome to the Alphabet Mafia, he said, raising his latte in a toast. Your membership card is in the mail. We have meetings on Tuesdays. I'm serious, Marcus. I'm kind of freaking out about this. What? You're in love with an amazing woman who loves you back. That's a good thing. But what about at work? What if parents complain? What if the administration? Sam, we live in Seattle, not rural Alabama. The school has 3 openly gay teachers, including me. You'll be fine. And if anyone has a problem with it, they can take it up with the union. His confidence helped, but I was still nervous. Being gay, in theory, was different from being openly gay at work, with my family, in the world. Telling my parents was the hardest part. I waited until Thanksgiving, figuring that if it went badly, at least I'd only ruined one holiday rather than stretched tension over weeks. I brought Rebecca with me to Spokane, introducing her as my girlfriend. My mom's smile froze on her face. My dad looked confused. My younger brother Ethan, home from college, looked delighted by the chaos. Dinner was awkward. My mom kept making pointed comments about how I'd never mentioned being interested in women before. My dad barely spoke. Rebecca handled it with grace, being polite and charming despite the obvious tension. After dinner, my mom pulled me aside. Is this because of Trevor? She asked. Because if he hurt you, this has nothing to do with Trevor, Mom. I'm gay. I probably always have been. I just didn't realize it. But you've dated men. You talked about wanting to get married and have children. I can still do those things, I said, fighting to keep my voice calm. Just with a woman instead of a man. Rebecca is amazing, and I'm happier than I've ever been. I was hoping you could be happy for me. My mom's eyes filled with tears. I need time to process this. Samantha. My dad found me later, alone in my childhood bedroom. Your mother's upset, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. I know, she'll come around. She just needs to adjust her expectations. He was quiet for a moment. Are you happy? Really happy, Dad? Then that's what matters. He patted my hand awkwardly. This Rebecca seems nice, smart. Your mother mentioned she's getting her PhD, marine biology. She's brilliant. Good. You deserve someone brilliant. He stood up to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I saw how she looks at you. That girl's in love with you. Anyone with eyes could see it. It wasn't the enthusiastic acceptance I'd hoped for. But it was something my mom did eventually come around, though it took months. Small steps, asking about Rebecca occasionally, liking photos I posted on social media, eventually inviting both of us to Christmas. She'd probably never fully understand, but she was trying, and that had to be enough. But Rebecca and I navigated the early months with a mix of joy and stumbling. I was learning how to be in a relationship with a woman, and Rebecca was being patient with my learning curve, while also setting boundaries about what she needed. Our first real fight happened 3 months in. I'd made plans with Jess without checking with Rebecca first, forgetting we'd talked about going to a research presentation she was excited about. You can't just forget about me, Rebecca said, hurt evident in her voice. I know you're new to this, but that doesn't mean my feelings don't matter. I didn't forget about you. You did, Sam. You made plans without even thinking about me, and that hurts. She was right, and I apologized. We talked about communication and consideration and what we needed from each other. It wasn't fun, but it was necessary, and we came out stronger. The physical side of our relationship deepened naturally. The first time we slept together was 3 months after that kiss on the mountain. I was nervous and experienced in a way I hadn't been since I was a teenager, but Rebecca was patient and communicative, and it was intense and vulnerable and better than anything I'd experienced before. Is it always like this? I asked afterward, lying in her bed, tangled in sheets and emotion. No, Rebecca said. It's like this when you're in love with someone who loves you back, when there's trust and connection and genuine attraction. I've never felt this before, I admitted. The sex I had before, with men, it was fine, sometimes good, but this is different. This is real, Rebecca finished. This is what it feels like when it's real. Chapter 9. 1 year later, year after that first kiss, we decided to move in together. Rebecca's apartment lease was ending, and I was ready to leave shared housing behind. We found a small 2-bedroom in Capitol Hill, 1 bedroom for us, one converted into Rebecca's home office for thesis work. Moving day was chaos. Captain was convinced we were abandoning him and refused to leave his crate. Rebecca's lab equipment needed special handling. I'd accumulated far more books than any reasonable person should own. But by the end of the day, we were home together, eating pizza on our new couch, exhausted and happy. I can't believe we lived together, I said, leaning against her. Is it weird? It's perfect. Living with Rebecca taught me things about her I hadn't known. That she was messy when working on her thesis but compulsively organized in the kitchen, that she sang in the shower, badly and enthusiastically, that she was grumpy in the mornings until she'd had coffee, that she always left cabinet doors half open, which drove me crazy until I just accepted it as part of who she was. I learned to exist in domestic harmony with someone I actually loved, rather than just tolerated. I learned the difference between sharing space and sharing a life. At work, I was fully out now. My students knew I had a girlfriend, and most of them thought it was cool. I'd incorporated more LGBTQ+ literature into my curriculum. Fun Home, The Color Purple, written on the body. When a student came out to me as gay during office hours, I was able to share my own experience, and the relief on his face made all my anxiety about being out worth it. Rebecca defended her dissertation in May. I sat in the back of the room, watching her present years of research with confidence and passion. When the committee approved her work and she officially became Dr. Chen, I was the first person she hugged. I couldn't have done this without you, she whispered. You absolutely could have, I said, but I'm glad I got to be here for it. Rebecca proposed on the anniversary of our first kiss. We hiked back to Rattlesnake Ledge, the same trail where everything had changed 2 years earlier. It was October again, the trees golden, the air crisp. At the summit, she pulled out a ring, simple platinum with a small sapphire, my birthstone 2 years ago. We sat here and admitted we were in love with each other, Rebecca said. It was terrifying and thrilling and the best decision I've ever made. You've taught me what it means to be with someone who sees all of you, the messy parts, the scared parts, the parts still figuring things out. Ton chooses to stay anyway. I want to keep choosing you every day for the rest of our lives. Sam, will you marry me? I was crying before she finished the question. Yes, absolutely yes. She slipped the ring on my finger, and we kissed with the whole city spread out below us. The same view that had witnessed our beginning, now witnessing our promise of forever. Planning a lesbian wedding in 2023 was easier than it would have been a decade earlier. But it still came with unique challenges. Who walks down the aisle first? Do we both wear dresses? Who leads in the first dance? We decided to walk down the aisle together, both wearing dresses, Rebecca in deep blue, me in cream. We'd have a friend officiate at a small venue overlooking Puget Sound, with about 80 guests. My mom had fully come around by then. She helped with planning, went dress shopping with us, and cried at the bridal shower Rebecca's friends threw for us. Having her support meant everything. Rebecca's family was wonderful throughout. Her mom insisted on traditional Chinese tea ceremony elements, which we happily incorporated. Her dad gave a speech at the rehearsal dinner about how happy he was that his daughter had found someone who loved her for exactly who she was. The wedding itself was perfect. We wrote our own vows. I promised to always support her research obsessions, to never judge her horror movie choices, and to love her through all the phases of life we had yet to discover. She promised to be patient with my learning curve, to make me coffee every morning, and to remind me every day that coming out wasn't something I had to regret or feel behind on. I'd figured it out at exactly the right time. When we kissed as the officiant pronounced us married, our guests cheered. Walking back down the aisle together, married, felt surreal and wonderful and like the most natural thing in the world. 3 years into marriage, we're settled into the comfortable rhythm of long-term partnership. Rebecca is now a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Washington, doing the conservation work she's always dreamed of. I got a promotion to department head at my school, which means more paperwork but also more influence over curriculum. We've talked about having children, probably through IVF, though we're still debating who would carry. Rebecca jokes that she's done her thesis and I should do the pregnancy, but I know she'd love to experience it. We're not in a rush. We're only 31 and 29, with time to figure it out. Our life isn't dramatically different from any other married couples. We argue about whose turn it is to clean the bathroom. We have weekly date nights and sometimes skip them because we're too tired. We visit both sets of parents for holidays, navigating family dynamics and finding ways to blend traditions. But there's something underneath all of that, a profound gratitude for having found each other, for having had the courage to acknowledge what we felt, for building a life that's authentically ours. Sometimes I think about that day at the DMV, sitting 3 seats away from a stranger who would change my entire life. If I'd been called up earlier, if she hadn't been there that day, if I hadn't made that first conversational overture, how different would my life be? I think about the version of me who thought she was straight, who kept dating men who didn't feel quite right, who assumed that's just how relationships were supposed to feel. I feel sad for her sometimes, for all the time she spent trying to be someone she wasn't. But I also know that I figured it out when I was meant to figure it out. Some people know they're gay from childhood. Others don't realize until they're 40 or 50 or older. There's no right timeline for understanding yourself. Coming out in my mid-20s, I missed some things, the college experimentation, the early years of queer community building, but I also avoided some of the harder parts coming out to parents while still dependent on them. Navigating high school as an openly gay teen. My journey was mine, and it led me exactly where I needed to be. If you're reading this and something resonates, if you're questioning whether what you feel for your best friend is just friendship, if you're wondering why your relationships with men have never quite felt right, if you're scared of what it might mean to acknowledge your attraction to women, I want to tell you a few things. First, it's okay to not have all the answers right away. Sexuality is complex and personal. You don't need to rush to a label or force yourself to figure everything out immediately. Give yourself permission to explore and question and be uncertain. Second, feeling attracted to women doesn't negate your past. If you've dated men before, those relationships were real even if they weren't right. You weren't lying or fucking you were doing the best you could with your understanding of yourself at the time. Third, coming out is terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Some people won't understand, some relationships may change or end, but the freedom of living authentically, of finally understanding why things never quite fit before, that freedom is worth the fear. Fourth, there's no expiration date on figuring out your sexuality. You're not too old, you're not too late, you haven't missed your chance. People come out at 15 and at 75, and every age in between. Your timeline is valid. Fifth, if you're in love with your best friend, it might be worth the risk to tell them. Yes, it could change everything. Yes, you could lose the friendship, but you could also gain something even more profound. Rebecca and I are best friends who also happen to be in love, and that foundation makes our marriage stronger than I ever imagined possible. Finally, trust yourself. Deep down, you probably already know your truth. You're just scared to acknowledge it. That's normal. That's human. But when you're ready, when you find the courage to be honest with yourself, that's when your real life begins. The first IVF cycle felt like a science experiment mixed with hope and terror. Rebecca took hormone injections twice daily, and I learned to administer them despite my squeamishness about needles. Her mood swings were intense, one moment laughing at something Captain did, the next crying over a commercial about paper towels. I'm sorry, she'd say, after each emotional outburst, the hormones are making me insane. You're not insane, I'd reassure her. You're doing something incredibly hard for us. We retrieved 12 eggs, 10 fertilized. We transferred to embryos and waited the agonizing 2 weeks before the pregnancy test. The day we got the results, we were both working from home. Rebecca took the blood test in the morning, and the clinic said they'd call with results by afternoon. We tried to work but mostly just stared at our respective screens, jumping every time a phone rang. When Rebecca's phone finally buzzed, she answered on speaker. Congratulations, the nurse said. You're pregnant. We both burst into tears, hugging each other tightly while Captain barked in confusion. We were going to be parents. This was really happening. The first trimester was rough. Rebecca had severe morning sickness, which was actually all-day sickness, and could barely keep anything down. She lost weight instead of gaining it, and I worried constantly. But the 8-week ultrasound showed a strong heartbeat, and slowly, the nausea began to ease. At 12 weeks, we started telling people. My students were excited, already asking if they could meet the baby. My parents were cautiously thrilled. This would be their first grandchild. Rebecca's parents were over the moon, immediately buying tiny outfits and planning to visit after the birth. It's a girl, the ultrasound technician told us at 20 weeks. Rebecca squeezed my hand. A daughter, our daughter, I corrected. And the reality of it hit me. We were going to have a daughter, a little girl who would call us both mom, who would grow up seeing our love as normal and natural, who would never question whether her family was real. We spent months preparing, converting the second bedroom from Rebecca's office into a nursery, taking childbirth classes where we were often the only same-sex couple, reading every parenting book we could find, though we quickly learned that most of them assumed a mother-father dynamic. It's like we're invisible, Rebecca complained after reading another book that exclusively used mom and dad terminology. We'll write our own playbook, I said, like we've done with everything else. We decided on names, Eleanor for a girl, after Rebecca's grandmother. We debated who would be mom and who would be mama, eventually deciding to let Eleanor choose as she got older. For now, we'd both just be mom. The legal work was complicated and frustrating, even though we were married, even though Rebecca was carrying our child, even though we were using a donor. I still had to go through a second parent adoption in our state to be recognized as Eleanor's legal parent. It felt like an insult. No straight married couple had to prove they were both parents of their child. It's not fair, I said to our lawyer, a kind woman who specialized in LGBTQ+ family law. No, it's not, she agreed, but it's reality, and we need to protect your rights. And news. If something happened to Rebecca, without this adoption, you'd have no legal claim to your own daughter. So we did the paperwork, paid the fees, and added it to the list of things that made being a queer family harder than it should be. Eleanor Rose Chung Carter was born on a rainy April morning after 14 hours of labor. I was by Rebecca's side the entire time, holding her hand, helping her breathe through contractions, and generally feeling useless while she did the actual work. When they finally placed Eleanor on Rebecca's chest, both of us were sobbing. She was perfect, tiny, and red-faced and screaming, but perfect. 7 pounds, 2 ounces of pure love. We made this, Rebecca whispered. Look what we made. You made this, I corrected. I just stood here being emotionally supportive. We both made this, she insisted. This is our daughter. The first weeks were impossibly hard. Eleanor had trouble latching, so Rebecca had to pump every 2 hours while I bottle fed. We were both exhausted, running on maybe 3 hours of sleep combined. The house was a disaster. We ate whatever was easiest and forgot to shower for days at a time. But when Eleanor slept on my chest, her tiny body warm and trusting, I understood why people did this. When she looked up at me with unfocused newborn eyes, I felt a love so fierce it almost hurt. I didn't know I could love someone this much, I told Rebecca one night during a 3 a.m. feeding. I know, she said, watching Eleanor eat. It's terrifying and beautiful at the same time. My parents came to visit when Eleanor was 2 weeks old. My mom held her granddaughter and cried. All the lingering discomfort about our relationship seemingly forgotten in the face of this new little person. She's beautiful, my mom said. She has your nose, Rebecca, and Sam's ears. Rebecca pointed out. It was a small moment, but it mattered. My mom, acknowledging that Eleanor belonged to both of us, that she could see both of us in her, even though only Rebecca was biologically related. It felt like acceptance, finally, completely. Eleanor's first year taught us that having two moms came with unexpected challenges and beautiful moments. The pediatrician's office always assumed I was Rebecca's friend or sister, not her wife and Eleanor's other mother. We learned to immediately correct people. We're both her moms. Some people got it right away. Others looked confused or uncomfortable. One nurse at a routine checkup insisted on calling me aunt despite our corrections. Rebecca finally snapped. She's not her aunt. We're married. We're both her mothers. Please update your records accordingly. The nurse apologized, but it was exhausting always having to prove our family was real. On the other hand, Eleanor was surrounded by so much love, two sets of grandparents who adored her, my brother Ethan, who was surprisingly great with babies, Rebecca's sister who flew in from California every few months just to spend time with her niece, a community of LGBTQ friends who understood what we were navigating. When Eleanor was 6 months old, we attended our first Pride parade as a family. I carried her in a baby carrier, and Rebecca pushed the stroller with our supplies. Seeing other families like ours, two moms, two dads, trans parents, non-binary parents, made me emotional. This is her community, I said to Rebecca, as we watched the parade pass by. She grew up knowing she's not alone, that families come in all different forms. She's lucky, Rebecca said. We all are. When Eleanor was 4 months old, I had to go back to work. Rebecca was on parental leave for 6 months total, so she'd be home with Eleanor for another 2 months before we had to figure out childcare. Leaving Eleanor that first day back was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. I cried in the car. I called Rebecca 3 times before lunch to check on them. My students noticed I was distracted and asked if everything was okay. I just had a baby, I explained to my first period class. Well, my wife had a baby, but we're both her moms, and being away from her is really hard. One of my students, a junior named Ashley, raised her hand. My moms were the same way. They said the first few weeks back at work were the worst, but it got easier. Your moms? I asked. Yeah, I have 2 moms too. They've been together since before I was born. After class, Ashley stayed behind. It's cool that you have a baby with your wife, she said. My moms don't talk about it much at work. They're worried about what parents will think. I worried about that too, I admitted, but I decided I'd rather be honest about who I am and who my family is. If people have a problem with it, that's on them, not me. That's brave, Ashley said. Or stubborn, I joked. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Having a student with 2 moms made me feel less alone. We formed a small support group of LGBTQ+ faculty and staff at the school, and I learned I wasn't the only queer parent navigating these challenges. Finding childcare as a same-sex couple was harder than expected. Several home daycares we contacted suddenly had waiting lists when we mentioned we were 2 moms. One woman told us directly that her religious beliefs wouldn't allow her to care for a child with gay parents. It's 2024, Rebecca said after another rejection. How is this still happening? Because discrimination doesn't disappear just because laws change, I said. People still believe what they believe. We eventually found an amazing daycare that explicitly welcomed LGBTQ+ families. The director, Maria, had been running the center for 20 years and had several children of same-sex couples enrolled. Family is family, Maria said when we toured the facility. Love is love, and Eleanor will be safe and celebrated here. Eleanor started daycare when she was 6 months old. The transition was hard on all of us. Sash cried at drop-off. Rebecca cried in the car afterward, and I felt guilty for not being there. But slowly, Eleanor adjusted. She made friends, learned new things, and seemed genuinely happy there. When Eleanor was 8 months old, we finalized my second parent adoption. We had to appear before a judge, bring Eleanor with us, and essentially ask permission from me to be legally recognized as her parent. Something that would have been automatic if I were a man married to Rebecca. The judge was kind, but the process felt degrading. We had to prove our relationship was stable, that I was committed to Eleanor, that this adoption was in her best interest, as if my love for my daughter needed to be questioned. When the judge finally granted the adoption, I cried with relief. Eleanor was legally mine. If something happened to Rebecca, I wouldn't lose my daughter. If we traveled, I could make medical decisions. I existed in the eyes of the law as her parent. Congratulations, the judge said. Though I want to note that this process is antiquated and discriminatory, I'm hopeful that one day, the law will recognize both parents in same-sex marriages from birth. Without this extra step, so are we, Rebecca said. We celebrated that night with a small party at our house. My parents, Rebecca's parents, and our closest friends all came. My mom gave a toast about how proud she was of the family we'd built, and I cried again because 5 years ago, I wasn't sure she'd ever get to this point of acceptance. Eleanor's second year brought new joys and challenges. She started walking, then running, then climbing everything. She learned to say mama and used it to refer to both of us, which was confusing but adorable. Eventually, she started differentiating. Yusei became mommy, and Rebecca was mama, not through any decision of ours, but just because that's what felt natural to her. Mommy up, she'd demand when she wanted to be carried. Mama book, when she wanted Rebecca to read to her. Hearing her call us both by mother names, accepting both of us equally as her parents, was healing in ways I didn't expect. This was what normal looked like for her. She didn't know that some people thought her family was different or wrong. She just knew she had 2 parents who loved her completely. We started attending a playgroup for children of LGBTQ+ parents. Watching Eleanor play with other kids who had 2 moms or 2 dads or trans parents was beautiful. These kids were growing up in a world where diverse families were their normal. One day, a little boy at the playground asked Eleanor why she had 2 moms. Because I do, she said matter-of, then went back to playing. Rebecca and I exchanged a look. That was it. That was the answer. Because she did. No justification needed. No explanation required. We existed. Our family existed. And that was enough. When Eleanor was 2.5, Rebecca brought up having another baby. I've been thinking, she said one night after we'd put Eleanor to bed. What if we had another one? We have frozen embryos from our IVF cycle. I could carry again, or you could carry this time. I'd been thinking about it too. Eleanor was amazing, and the idea of giving her a sibling was appealing. But I wasn't sure I was ready for the chaos of a newborn again. Can we handle 2? I asked. Financially, emotionally, logistically, probably not, Rebecca admitted. But did we think we could handle 1 before Eleanor came? And we figured it out. We spent months discussing it. My career was going well. I'd just been promoted to assistant principal. Rebecca had been offered a tenure-track position at UW starting the following fall. Money was still tight but manageable. Eleanor was mostly sleeping through the night. It felt like maybe we could do this. We decided to try. This time, I would carry. Rebecca had done the hard work of pregnancy once. It was my turn. Plus, I wanted to experience the feeling of a baby growing inside me. The physical connection I'd missed with Eleanor. The embryo transfer worked on the first try. At 6 weeks, we confirmed I was pregnant. We waited until 12 weeks to tell Eleanor. There's a baby in mommy's tummy, Rebecca explained, showing Eleanor pictures from pregnancy books. You're going to be a big sister. Baby, Eleanor said, looking confused. Then she lifted up my shirt and poked my stomach. Hi, baby. Being pregnant while chasing a toddler was exhausting. I had morning sickness while Eleanor demanded constant attention. I was tired all the time but couldn't nap because Eleanor had given up her afternoon nap. My body ached, my emotions were wild, and Eleanor seemed to sense the change and became extra clingy. I don't know how people do this with multiple kids, I said to Rebecca one particularly hard day. 1 day at a time, she said, taking Eleanor to the park so I could rest. And with lots of help from partners who understand, my second trimester was easier. The nausea faded, my energy returned, and Eleanor became fascinated with the idea of the baby. She'd talk to my belly, tell the baby about her day, insist on kissing my stomach goodnight. At the 20-week ultrasound, we learned we were having a boy, a son, I said, holding Rebecca's hand while Eleanor sat on her lap, watching the ultrasound screen with wide eyes. That's baby, Eleanor asked. That's your baby brother, Rebecca confirmed. My baby, Eleanor said possessively, and we both laughed. We named him James Oliver. This time, the legal process was slightly easier. Our state had updated its laws, and I was automatically listed as the birth mother. Rebecca still had to do a second parent adoption, but at least the process was more streamlined. James was born on a cold November morning, 3 days before Thanksgiving. Eleanor, now 3 years old, met her baby brother when he was 2 hours old. He's so tiny, she whispered, gently touching his hand. You were that tiny once? I told her. I'm big now, she declared. I'm the big sister. Having 2 kids was exponentially harder than one. James was a fussy baby who only slept in 20-minute increments. Eleanor was going through a jealous phase and acted out for attention. Rebecca and I were both working full-time. We were surviving on caffeine and determination. But there were beautiful moments too. Eleanor singing to James when he cried. The first time James smiled at his sister. Watching Rebecca with both of our children. Seeing our family complete. This is hard, I said to Rebecca one night after we'd finally gotten both kids to sleep. The hardest thing we've ever done. She agreed. Worth it. Absolutely worth it. The next few years were a blur of preschool drop-offs, daycare pickups, work deadlines, and endless loads of laundry. Eleanor started kindergarten. James learned to walk and immediately became a tiny tornado of destruction. Our house was perpetually messy. We were perpetually tired. And date nights became a distant memory. But we found our rhythm. Rebecca's parents moved to Seattle to be closer to their grandchildren, which gave us built-in babysitting. My mom visited monthly and had fully embraced her role as grandmother to both kids. We hired a house cleaner twice a month because something had to give, and it wasn't going to be our sanity. Eleanor was a bright, curious kid who asked a million questions and loved school. James was wild and adventurous, always climbing and exploring. They fought like siblings do, but also loved each other fiercely. One day, Eleanor came home from first grade upset. A kid at school said, "I can't have 2 moms," she told us, tears in her eyes. He said it's not real. Rebecca and I exchanged a look. We'd known this was coming, but that didn't make it easier. Some people don't understand families like ours, I said, pulling Eleanor onto my lap. But that doesn't make our family any less real. You have 2 moms who love you very much. That's real. That's true. And anyone who says different is wrong. I told him he was wrong, Eleanor said, but he laughed at me. Standing up for yourself and your family is brave, Rebecca said. We're proud of you for defending our family. Can I bring you both to show him? Eleanor asked, to show everyone that 2 moms is normal. We both went. I took the morning off work, and Rebecca rearranged her teaching schedule. We stood in front of Eleanor's first grade class and talked about our family, how we met, how we fell in love, how we decided to have children. Do you both love Eleanor the same? One kid asked. Yes, I said. We both love her completely. Which one of you is the real mom? Another kid asked. We both are, Rebecca answered. Eleanor has 2 real moms. Some kids have a mom and a dad. Some have 2 moms or 2 dads. Some have 1 parent. Some live with grandparents. All families are different, and all families are real. Eleanor beamed with pride. After we left, her teacher sent us an email thanking us for coming and sharing our story. Apparently, the kids had spent the rest of the day talking about different kinds of families, and the boy who'd said our family wasn't real had apologized to Eleanor. Now, 10 years after that first kiss on the mountain, we're a family of 4, navigating life in all its messy, beautiful complexity. Eleanor is 7 and wants to be a marine biologist like her mama. James is 4 and wants to be a dinosaur, which we're pretty sure isn't a career option, but we support anyway. Rebecca's research has taken off. She's been featured in National Geographic and consulted on international reef restoration projects. I'm now a principal at my school, working to create a more inclusive environment for LGBTQ+ students and families. We're both exhausted most of the time. The house is always messy. We can't remember the last time we slept past 7 a.m. Romance has to be scheduled between work and kids and life. We argue about whose turn it is to do bath time and who forgot to buy milk. But we're also happy, deeply, authentically happy. We built this life together, this beautiful, chaotic, perfectly imperfect life. Last week, we went back to Rattlesnake Ledge as a family. Eleanor hiked the whole way herself, and I carried James on my back. At the summit, we all sat on that same rock where Rebecca and I had our first kiss. This is where we fell in love, Rebecca told the kids. That's gross, Eleanor said, but she was smiling. Baby, James said, pointing at the view, which was his word for pretty much everything he found exciting. I looked at Rebecca and she looked at me, and we both started laughing. Here we were, a decade later, with 2 kids and a life we couldn't have imagined back then. No regrets, Rebecca asked quietly. Not a single one, I said. Best decision I ever made was falling in love with you at the DMV. We didn't fall in love at the DMV. That came later. No, Rebecca said. I think I started falling in love with you that day. I just didn't know it yet. Your journey is uniquely yours. It won't look like mine. It won't look like anyone else's. And that's okay. I figured out I was gay at Some people know at 4. Some people don't figure it out until they're 60. None of those timelines is wrong. You're not behind. You're not too late. You're exactly where you need to be. Being queer isn't always easy. There are still people who don't understand, systems that don't accommodate us, moments when you have to fight to be recognized and accepted. Building a life and family as a same-sex couple comes with extra complications that straight couples never face. But it's also filled with incredible joy. Finding your community, living authentically, falling in love with someone who sees and accepts all of you, building a family that reflects your truth. Rebecca and I were best friends who fell in love, and that foundation has made everything else possible. The hard conversations, the coming out processes, the fertility journey, the parenting challenges. We built our relationship on friendship and trust, and that's carried us through everything else. If you're in love with your best friend, it might be worth the risk to tell them. If you're questioning your sexuality, it might be worth the discomfort to explore that honestly. If you're out but struggling, it might be worth reaching out to find your community. Your story is still being written, and whatever it looks like, whether it includes a partner or not, children or not, a big coming out or a quiet personal realization, it's valid and real and worthy. 10 years ago, I was sitting in a DMV, frustrated with my failed relationship with Trevor, having no idea that my whole life was about to change. 5 years ago, I was standing at an altar, marrying the woman who'd been my best friend before she became my everything. If you're reading this and you're still figuring things out, whether you're questioning your sexuality, struggling with coming out, afraid to tell your best friend how you feel, or navigating the challenges of being out in a world that doesn't always understand, I want to leave you with this. Now I'm a mom, a principal, a wife, and a member of a community I didn't even know I belonged to until I found the courage to be honest about who I am. The journey was scary, but it led me home. Where will yours lead you?